We'll start with the second part. Now, sources of history. As discussed in the last tutorial, there are two sources of history: archaeological source and literary source. Now, what are archaeological sources? Now, archaeological sources, children, they are basically direct sources for which we have physical evidence, right? What comes under this is artifact, monuments, coins, inscriptions. We will be taking these four in detail, but also cave paintings. So anything that we have a physical evidence of and it cannot be changed or altered by humans is known as a archaeological source. Now, what are literary sources? Literary sources, children, they are written records, right? Written records are known as literary sources. Now, there are two kinds of literary sources in your book. The division is between religious and secular. That means religious and non-religious writings, right? Now, the first one, artifact. What do you understand by artifact? Now, children, artifacts are basically objects of different kinds that have been made by humans. Now, what all it includes? It includes metal objects, pottery, tools, ornaments, jewelry, weapons, sculptures. Now, what is the importance of this artifact? Importance of artifacts are that they help the historian in understanding the culture and life of people. For example, if this is a pot, right? Now, what is this pot made of? What kind of techniques are used to make this pot? What kind of materials have been put in it, right? So you get to know a lot about the life of the people, the culture, right? From that particular period. That is how artifacts are very important, right? So the next, children, is monuments. Now, what are monuments? Monuments are old buildings, ruins of old buildings, mosques, temples, tombs, caves, palaces, stupas, right? Now, they offer a very important and interesting insight into the past heritage. Now, for example, children, do you see this picture? This picture? Yeah. So, this is Nalanda University, right? Now, Nalanda University was formed somewhere around 5th and 6th century BC. So these are basically remains from 5th and 6th century, right? From the Gupta, during the Gupta Empire, right? And this was a hub of scholars from people from all across Asia used to come here to study, right? So this offers very interesting insight into the ancient education system. This is just an example, and this picture here, it is of Harappan civilization. Harappan civilization again goes back to somewhere around 4,700 years ago, somewhere in Pakistan along the Indus River, right? So this is how monuments give very interesting insights into the past heritage and lives of the people. Next is coins. Coins are also very important archaeological sources. Okay? Now, coins tell us about the economy of the kingdom. Now, when I use this term economy, right, what do we mean? So, when I use the term economy, it means how rich is the kingdom? Yes? How? Now you would say, ma'am, how can we say that, how can coins tell us how rich was a kingdom? So we can tell whether a kingdom was rich or not by looking at what kind of metal was used, right? Was it copper? Was it silver? Was it gold? Or any other metal, right? Now, they also offer very interesting insight into the religion, the clothes, and the pastime of the people. Now, for example, now do you see these two coins? Now, these two coins have been formed by Samudragupta, right? So, this is from the Samudragupta Empire. And these two coins show that he has a lot of musical instruments in his hands, right? He's surrounded with music. That's how we get to know that he was apparently he enjoyed music, right? And you see the script. The coin must have some script, so historians get to know what kind of language was used, and it helps them to correlate with other things that they have found in the region, right? So coins also offer very interesting insights. Next, what we have, children, is inscriptions. Now, what are inscriptions? Inscriptions, children, are written records that are found on rocks, pillars, copper plates, cave walls, walls of temples, palaces, right? So any kind of written record that we found on rocks, on solid surfaces, is known as an inscription. Now, you would be thinking, why are they so important? Now, they are important. These inscriptions are very important, children, because they tell us about administration, the events, rulings, declarations. For example, now, see, if there is a king, right? So the king wanted his people to know what his thoughts were, like what his rules were, for rules for his kingdom. So how would a king tell the people what the rules for his kingdom were? Now, there was no television at the time. There was no radio. So what would he do? He would use these inscriptions. He would use rocks and pillars and walls to tell the public what his rules were. So these kind of writings offer very interesting insights into how the administration was working, what kind of events were happening, what kind of rulings did the rulers pass, right? Now, and the study, children, the study of these inscriptions is known as epigraphy. And the person who studies these inscriptions is known as an epigrapher or an epigraphist, right? Next, children, we come on to the literary sources. Just a small recap, we studied 4 kind of archaeological sources: coins, monuments, inscriptions, and artifacts. Right? Now, literary sources. What are literary sources? Literary sources are whatever our ancestors have written, and we can find evidence of that. They are known as the literary sources. And children, we also have manuscripts. So manuscripts are handwritten records in the form of books. What are manuscripts? Manuscripts are handwritten records in the form of books. Now, these manuscripts give very interesting details about customs, religious beliefs, and culture of the people. We will now see. Right? So there are 2 kinds of literary sources: religious and secular. Now, what are religious? Clearly, as the name states, any writing that has to do with religion is known as a religious literature, right? Now, some of the very important books for our subcontinent is the Vedas, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, Upanishads, right? And historians draw information about the religious, social, and economic life of the people through these religious literatures, right? For example, what kind of sacrifices were performed, and who performed the sacrifices, and how was the society formed, right? And then how did they practice religion, and everything. So next, children, is the secular literature. Now, children, I want you to understand something very clearly. Firstly, what is secular? What is the meaning of secular? It's very interesting in today's time. I think it is very important for all of you to know and understand. Now, children, secular, so I will start with an example. So when I say India is a secular country, okay, you will read this and you will hear this constantly in a lot of newspapers, in a lot of places. So India is a secular country. So when I say secular, that means that we do not have an official religion, right? We do not have an official religion. There are countries who say that we are a Christian country, we are a Muslim country, right? India, because India is a secular country, therefore we do not have a particular religion. Everyone can practice their own religion in India, right? But we are not identified by religion. Yes, therefore we are a secular country. So writings that are not religious are known as secular writings, right? Now, historical accounts and biographies written by poets or foreign travelers come under secular literature, right? What comes under it? Historical accounts and biographies that have been written by poets and foreign travelers. Now, how you would think that how are they important? What kind of insights do they give? So they record the happenings, the events, the administrative setup, rules, and declarations by kings. Yes. So now, children, for example, now this is a very interesting example, Arthashastra by Kautilya. Now this man that you see here, he is Kautilya. And Kautilya wrote this book called Arthashastra. Right? Kautilya has written, and this book, children, I would like to tell you, it is very much read and understood even today by people all across the world. Now, what was it that this Arthashastra had? It did not talk about religion. It talked about administration. Yes. Now, when I say administration, what do I mean? So, even our school has an administration department. I think all of you know that. All of our school has an administration department. Similarly, children, even the country needs an administrative department, right? Any organization to function, you need an administrative department who can tell us that, okay, now we need this, or this needs to go there, or this is how this will go there or where, right? So administration is a very important function of a school, of a country. Similarly, even for a kingdom, administration is very important. Now, Arthashastra, in this book Arthashastra, Kautilya told about administration, right? That how to administer the country in a way that so that it can flourish nicely. Yes, so this is very important, and till date also a lot of people study it, and it is very much valid. It offers very interesting insights. Yeah. So next is Indica by Megasthenes. Now Megasthenes was a Greek. He was a Greek ambassador who came to India, and whatever he saw, he has written in his book called Indica, right? And again, so how is this important, or what can it tell us? Tell the historians about. So it will tell historians about how was the society, what kind of kingdom was there, right? How was the king? Were people happy, right? So very interesting details you can get by these kind of biographies and historical accounts that have been written by poets and foreign travelers. Now, children, we come on to the next aspect, which is the geographical impact. Now, how does geography impact history? Right? Now, kids, physical features of a country impact and shape its history. Similarly, the physical features of India have impacted and shaped Indian history. Now, for example, Himalayas. You see the Himalayas? Himalayas are here, right? Now, these Himalayas have been natural barriers from invasions from north. So, kingdoms here could not invade India because of Himalayas. It was very difficult to cross through Himalayas. Yes. Then northern plains. Okay. Right. So, yeah, kids, you have the northern plains here. All right. So these are the northern plains, right? Now, northern plains, you see, you have Ganga River, and these rivers, all of them flowing through. This is a very fertile area, right? So now a lot of cities came about this region of Ganga. You have Magad and all of these empires in the 5th and the 6th century, somewhere around 2700 years ago. Yes. Similarly, this is Indus River, children, and along the banks of the Indus River, somewhere around 4700 years ago, you had the Harappan civilization, right? Cities started growing in this region, right? Now, similarly, kids, the Deccan Plateau. Now, Deccan Plateau, this is the Deccan Plateau. Now, this Deccan Plateau offered a very powerful military base, which made very difficult for outside kingdoms to other kingdoms to come and take over, right? And similarly, these coastal plains. Now, kids, coastal plains have been very important in shaping our history. Why? Because they offer to be very important commercial zones for building commercial relations, right? When I say commercial relations, sea routes. You see, sea routes have been the most ideal way of people going and exploring distant lands. So people from all over the world came to the subcontinent and came to India. They got to know about India through the sea route, and they would come and settle in or explore the coastal regions first, right? So that is how it was very important center for commercial relations and trade. This also made India very rich, and distant regions got to know that how rich India is, right? All right. Next, children, what we have is what do these dates mean? Now, these dates, children, when I say you might have a lot of times heard 500 AD or 300 BC or 4700 BC. What does it mean, right? So, firstly, the 0 year. Which is the 0 year? So, the year of birth of Jesus Christ is known as the 0 year, and the years before Christ was born is known as BC. So, this 0 year, 0 to 1, is basically the birth of Jesus Christ, right? Years before Jesus are known as BC, and the years after Jesus Christ was born is known as AD. So what does BC stand for? BC stands for before Christ, and AD stands for Anno Domini, right? Which means in the year of Lord, right? But this was what historians used to use before. Now what historians have started using is BCE and CE. So if I have to talk about, say, 100 BC, 100 years before Christ was born, I would now use it as 100 years before the Common Era. It's not BC now, it's BCE, before the Common Era. And CE stands for Common Era. AD has now become CE, which stands for Common Era. Right? For example, India gained independence in the year 1947 AD. 1947, after the birth of 1947 years after the birth of Christ. Right? So it can also be written as either 1947 AD or 1947 CE, Common Era. All right. Next, okay, so children, you might wonder, how do historians get to know from which year did this particular artifact belong to? So if there is a pot, for example, historians, they have very interesting techniques they use, and to date a pot, they use the technique called thermoluminescence dating, right? It is used to date pots, and similarly to date organic matters like skull. When is this? How long ago was the skull? So, for example, how do you get to know about dinosaurs' age? So we get to know it through the technique called radiocarbon dating, right? With this, just a small recap. We end the chapter. A small recap what we studied. We studied about what is history. Then we studied about why is history important. Then the division of past into prehistory and history. Sources of history. We studied the archaeological and literary sources. In archaeological sources, we studied artifacts, inscriptions, monuments, and coins. And literary sources, we studied religious and the non-religious writings, which means the secular writings. Then we discussed how geography impacted the history of subcontinent. And lastly, what we learned was how dates are written in history. Right? Thank you so much. I hope you understood. If you've not, feel free to go back to the notes and read. And also, we will soon be taking a Zoom session on this chapter, and then we will take up your queries further. Right? Thank you so much. Have a nice day.